right, and we're live. Chillcast MMA, and I'm joined by Austin Brody of MMAPanic. We all know UFC 246 is going down this weekend, Saturday, January 18th, 2020. For the main event, Conor McGregor is taking on Donald Cerrone, and we uploaded the first two parts of this three-parter where we're just talking about the main event and from all angles involved. Part 1 was about the outside of the cage, X Factors, things of that nature. Part 2 was about Donald Cerrone. That was what we uploaded last week. And this part 3, is going to be about Conor McGregor. So Austin, there's a bunch of storylines that we can talk about first. There's been a lot of news about him. We know the press conference, the pre-fight press conference is going down today at around 8 o'clock Eastern time. So when you think about Conor McGregor and all things involved with him, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Attitude, probably like what Conor McGregor we're going to see show up from all like the interviews we've got so far this fight week and what we've got leading up to this fight. So far, we've seen a lot more calm, composed Conor McGregor than we've seen in the past. Even in the Khabib fight, Conor seemed all fight week and leading up to the fight, he seemed super manic and crazy and nuts, and we haven't seen that so far in fight week. Like you said, the press conference tonight, and I think that'll be the biggest tell. But so far, we've seen him be calm and composed and relaxed. So I think that makes for a much more dangerous and harder fighter to beat. What does it do for pay-per-view buys and all that stuff? I think that's a different conversation. Who knows? But yeah, I expect it to be a different sort of fight week and fight for McGregor. When he's talked about Cowboy so far, he's been very confident that he's going to beat him, but it hasn't been like he's gave him some compliments. It hasn't been as disparaging as which is like the usual blueprint for Conor McGregor when he goes up against an opponent. He kind of tears him all the way down, and he hasn't done that with Cowboy. He's been respectable. He's been confident in his ability to beat him, but he's been respectable to him as a man, as a human. So I expect to see a lot more tame Conor. I don't know if that's because of maturity or in light of what's going on with him right now with the trouble he's been getting into and with the allegations and stuff to that nature. So I don't know totally why for sure, but I think we'll get a lot more calm and tame Conor McGregor this fight week.
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit tame now. Again, the presser is going down at 8 o'clock, so all of this is subject to change. We don't really know, but it's just going to be interesting for me. I feel like out of all the storylines, the main one that I want to see is how does he handle the elephant in the room? And you already said it, the sexual assault allegations. We know that he made some comments this week in the interview with Ariel Helwani, and you know, I don't want to make this completely about that because obviously we actually do have some X's and O's to get into, but it's just interesting to see. For me, that's one of the storylines where I'm like, I have to know because that's the elephant in the room that I feel like hasn't to date been properly addressed. And I do feel like, and again, we'll get into this a little bit deeper later on, but I do feel like that is part of the reason why up until now the fight week has been a little bit ho-hum. So that's going to be interesting to see how that storyline develops over the next couple of days leading up to the actual fight itself. But I guess to try and move a little bit forward, before we actually get into the X's and O's and what we actually think about Conor McGregor, for him, he's 21-4 right now. And if you're just looking at MMA, his last fight was a loss against Khabib Nurmagomedov, but then prior to that, it was 2 wins. So it's like, okay, I guess I'll just ask it to you like this. Before we get into what you actually see, are you buying into the narrative for Conor McGregor that his back is truly up against the wall? Or do you see this as a moment for him to just hit the reset button and everything is going to be good and dandy? Like, how do you think, from a career perspective, where is he really at going into this?
So yeah, it seems like he has already hit the reset button on like his attitude and the way he approaches fights and stuff like that. Do I think his back is against the wall? Yeah, I do. I agree with the stuff you said. I think if it was any other MMA fighter, we wouldn't be talking about it in the realm how we talk about Connor's talked about, where as far as like he just loses these days, he doesn't win anymore, all that stuff. Whereas you said, he lost to Khabib, which so has everyone else that's ever fought him. Before that, he beat. He was on a 2-fight winning streak. So, yeah, it's not totally fair, but I think when you're a star as big as Conor McGregor, the majority of the people that watch your fights and support you are people that are casual fans and not so much hardcore fans. And I don't think they totally see the difference. In their eyes, they got used to the rise of Conor, where he's beaten some world champion or some great guy every 6 months, and then that kind of stopped for a few years. So then in their head, he fell off. Similar to like I guess how a musician or a celebrity would be. So I think it's not warranted. I think he's every time he fights, he proves he's a very skilled fighter, and he proves that he's a top fighter. But I think that doesn't really matter to the majority of his fan base, which is casual fans, whether they cheer for him or against him. The people that watch Conor fights are casual fans that haven't seen him win. So in their mind, they're like, "Oh, he just loses these days. He's washed up," or any of those talks. So yeah, if he wants to get back in good graces with, in that sort of opinion, that talk with the casual fans thinking that he's back, then yeah, he has to come in and get a win. But like you said, I mean, I don't. It's just fight wise and what we've seen, it's not like we're seeing a deteriorating fighter where it's someone like BJ Penn or one of these guys where it's like, oh man, he's got to start thinking about retirement or something of that nature. He still puts up a competitive fight every time. He for the most part, he shows up and shows his skills. So yeah, I don't think it should be, but I think it is, and I think that's just the nature of being a megastar like Conor McGregor.
Yep, and those last two wins prior to the Khabib fight was Eddie Alvarez and Nate Diaz. And if you just look at MMA and you're not taking into account the boxing exhibition with Floyd Mayweather, and you guys know how I feel about that, but if you're not counting that, he's 3-2 in his last five, and he's 8-2 in his last 10. So again, I guess that's more to your point about how I'm not really viewing this as a definitive. Like, if he goes out there and loses this, sure, from a PR and branding standpoint, it's going to look terrible. But if he goes out there and can at least look solid against Donald Cerrone, which, given his style, I do not think even in a loss will be hard to do, I still think that, he can fight two, three more times in the UFC and be completely relevant. Sure, he won't be the world beater, but I don't think this idea that if he loses this, it's completely over and done. I don't believe we're truly at that point with him yet. But now to try and actually look at some of the technique as far as Conor McGregor is involved. First, let's start with the stand up. What is the first sort of thing, or what are some of the initial takeaways that you had when you started to look at his stand up heading into this matchup?
Yeah, well, the thing that you notice right away is how precise and accurate Connor is with almost every single thing he throws, particularly with like punches. It's everything seems to be calculated and precise, like except for when he gets tired. Obviously, we've seen his holes there, but yeah, his striking is among, I think, the best in the division. It's not like he's swinging for the fences every single time. It's not like he's doing these wild and flashy techniques. He does them sometimes, but it's not like he's one of those guys that just comes out and blows his gas tank. He's smart. He's calculated. When he gets someone hurt, he doesn't blitz in. He takes his time, picks his shots, and gets them out of there. And I think that's his biggest strength. I think one of his biggest strengths is he has the ability to kind of get into the zone faster than most fighters. What gets talked about to death with Cerrone, which is true, which should be, is how he's somewhat of a slow starter in the opening rounds. It takes him a little bit of time to get his bearings under him and really get into a rhythm. And Conor seems to be like someone that starts off in that rhythm where he's on point and ready to go. And interesting thing that came out this week was Eddie Alvarez talked about a time at a UFC card where he shared a locker room with Conor McGregor, and he said Conor McGregor was full on basically sparring uh, against Artem for like an hour before the fight even started, where it was basically one side where Artem was kind of just letting him beat up on him a little bit. So Eddie Alvarez was saying that's why he thinks Conor can start so fast, is because by the time he walks the octagon, he's already been warmed up. He's been in the zone. He knows the spacing, his timing. So that's what I noticed the first thing when you look into Conor McGregor's fights.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. And like you said, everyone has made that point about how Donald Cerrone starts slow. So I guess to your point, and I don't want to belabor it too much because you just laid it out, but that is one thing that I think he'll look to take advantage of, the fact that Donald Cerrone does start slow. But one of the things I guess for me, a little bit different that I sort of noticed when it comes to Conor McGregor is when he uses his left, and his left is something that everyone talks about, the fact that he has high accuracy the fact that he has high accuracy, uh, the fact that he has high accuracy with that as far as his left hand is concerned. But to that point, also 86% of his wins come via TKO or KO, and I feel like one of the things that helps him set that up is actually his right hand. But I feel like in this situation or in this case, like if you look at the Eddie Alvarez fight, that was one of the situations where one of the times where he dropped him, he completely set it up with his right hand, and Eddie just got kind of caught pawing and trying to fight that right hand, and the left hand just went straight down the middle. Eddie never even really saw it coming. But one of the things why I feel like that won't be as successful against Donald Cerrone is for him to do that, and for him, because of his stance with it being so wide and the fact that Donald Cerrone is so accurate when it comes to his kicking game, that's something where I feel like if you actually do try to paw and set Cerrone up to try and draw a reaction so you can land the deadly counter, if you try that game with Cerrone, I'm just sort of scared that I'm just sort of scared that Cerrone goes into twitch muscle mode and does something that could completely catch Conor McGregor off guard. And given the fact that his stance is wide, if he does get caught out in range and, God forbid he drops in this fight or something like that in the first round, I could see a situation where on the flip side of that, 100% of his losses have come via submission. So if Cerrone on the flip side is in that situation, I think he'll go for it and that'll just be the end of it. So I guess to go ahead and toss it back over to you, what do you make of sort of any deficiencies? Do you see any? Do you agree or disagree with what I said? Do you think Cerrone could take advantage of anything? Or do you think Conor McGregor can just keep it sharp, keep it clean, keep it standard, and will be good?
Yeah, I agree with some of what you're saying. I think what you're saying more applies. One like the flaw we see with Conor is obviously his cardio. Once he gets tired, it's hard for him to come back. We've only seen it one time when he fight Nate Diaz for the second time, where he was able to kind of gas out and then keep fighting past that and end up finishing well. But other than that, we've seen him gas, and then all the what we're talking about, all the sharpness, all the accuracy, picking his shots, all that goes out the window. Uh, and like you said, Cowboy, he's not some slouch. He's a very accomplished kickboxer. He has skills and techniques, and and he's more experienced than anybody at being in there. So like his ability to like stay calm and under the fire is probably going to be very good. And like you said, he just might have the feeling of just like throwing some wild thing and come back and affect Conor or hurt Conor with something big. But that's why I think Conor needs to give. He's got to earn Cowboy's respect right away. He's got to come out and land something on Cowboy to get him hurt and get his brain a little dizzy, or else because what we've seen is when people don't right away establish dominance and kind of get their respect out of Cowboy, he can, as the fight goes on, he gets into a zone and then he starts picking you apart. And once Cowboy's in the zone, I don't know if there's anybody better. Like we've seen some of the incredible video game like combinations he's landed on people like Rick Story and then like the head kick with Matt Brown. So I think Conor's got to give him something to think about early on in the fight, whether it's a big right hand, whether it's a huge kick to the stomach, or left hand, not right hand, or a huge kick to the stomach, or anything to that nature. But I think he's got to hurt Cowboy, or else I think a lot of what you're saying is true. And like I said, Cowboy will just start getting comfortable in the fight. He'll start getting Conor's paces down, start getting his rhythm down, and he'll find a way. He can find a way to exploit it then, especially if we're talking about later rounds. If it's a more fresh Cowboy and maybe a little more tired Conor who is less defensive and less sharp with his head movement and countering abilities. So, yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because with McGregor, it feels like if he keeps it standard, and by standard I mean just keep your stance wide, keep it on the outside, and I feel like to your point, that actually might be a little bit of a benefit if he can let Donald Cerrone catch a groove and don't pressure him too much and be worried and try to disrupt him. Let Cerrone get comfortable like how he usually does with that Muay Thai stance where he's able to mix in his boxing and open up with kicks. Let him get in that mode, because if he's doing that, that means that he's not just recklessly moving forward, and that will set the stage for Conor to actually look for his left hand. So I feel like that would actually be a positive for him if he lets Cerrone catch a little groove out in open space, as opposed to, and I guess we might as well start talking about his grappling, as opposed to just feeling like, you know what, things are getting turned up a little bit. Let me try and grapple, slow him down, get him up against the cage and look for a takedown. If you just do something that sort of bullheaded, and we have seen small lapses where he does things due to fatigue, where you're just like, why did you do that? You didn't necessarily have to do that. And I feel like if he does that with Donald Cerrone, that is going to be that's just going to be bad. But in the same time, I feel like if it's in those middle rounds where he is tired and he can hold Cerrone there and just stop the action and reset, I like that a little bit more because, like I said, with Donald Cerrone, when he's trying to evade and escape, or when he's first trying to initiate, I also feel like that's when he's at his most vulnerable, aka that's when Conor McGregor can take advantage the most, in my opinion. So I guess once again, I'll throw it back to you. When it comes to the grappling, how do you see those transitions playing out? What do you think, if you had to sort of paint the picture of how this could go in a positive way for Conor McGregor? How do you think that happens? Is there a situation where Conor has a grappling exchange that comes out on top? Or do you think just avoid it at all costs and let's just keep this one standing in that range?
Yeah, that's interesting. The point you just made is a very interesting one. You know, like if you don't want to grapple, give Cowboy some success early with the striking and make him fall in love with that, and then you can counter him and catch him. So, yeah, that's very interesting to think about too. But yeah, as far as the grappling goes, something interesting that's came out this fight week as far as interviews uh, talking about the grappling is it seems like Cowboy is getting very frustrated and annoyed with the fact that everyone keeps telling him that he has to take Conor down or try to take him down. I seen an interview he did with First Take where he was like visibly and obviously annoyed with how they kept saying he needs to take him down. So, and he was saying he was like, "I'm going to stand just to prove that I can." And now we sort of fighters.
Can we? I'm sorry, and I'm gonna you can get it right back to your point, but let's take a mini break in that action. And again, this is Showcast MMA. Nixon underscore speaks. Austin MMA Panic at MMA Panic on Twitter. Let's talk about that first take interview a little bit. The one that released earlier today. Was I the only one that thinks Cerrone looked visibly annoyed in that interview?
No, I agree, and that's why what put this thought into my head. Like he looked annoyed at them for almost every question they were asking, particularly with the takedowns and when they were saying like, "Are you worried that this might be the end for you or something like that?" It's like you, that's someone that doesn't know anything about Cowboy. Like he could get knocked out in 5 seconds. It's not going to be the end for him. So yeah, he was visibly mad about that. I thought so. I mean, is that what you got out of it too?
Yeah, it just came across, and I watch Undisputed. I watch First Take. So I can look at it a little bit from the lens of how do they treat all the other athletes versus how do they treat just an MMA fighter. And I'll say from that perspective, Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman, I mean, he's a combat sports savant as far as boxing is concerned, but when it comes to MMA, I mean, from someone that is just watching the content, it feels like he's still somewhat on a learning curve as far as some of the terminology and trying to understand the fighters and things like that. I guess we all are, but I feel like anyone hearing me say that, you sort of know what I mean. And with Stephen A, man, when basketball, football, he's fired up. But with MMA guys, the only guy that can talk to him and make him sound somewhat intelligible is Chael Sonnen. Outside of that, when it comes to Stephen A. Smith and MMA, it's a no go, man. And Cerrone, if he was in studio, I, I don't wish violence on anyone, but it looked like he would have been ready to throw down. He looked visibly ticked off. That's the most frustrated I've seen of any guest. They've interviewed Kevin Durant, they've interviewed Magic Johnson. The list goes on and on. Donald Cerrone looked really ticked off in that one.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that's the problem with some of these like talking head shows, and I watch First Take and their shows too, but it's so hard to be an expert on every single sports topic. It's just impossible. Like you said, Stephen A. Smith is very has a lot of knowledge, very intelligent about basketball and football and some of these other things. But once you start branching out, there's just too much. I think when they're doing something like that, they need to have an MMA correspondent on the show with them. They need to have an Ariel Hawani or Brett Okamoto or, like you said, Chael Sonnen. Man, like he can make anyone look like they can give a good MMA interview. So yeah, I think that's something. we both kind of caught. I think that they, like I said, I think when they have MMA people on, I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, I'm not an expert in this. I don't know a whole lot about this. Have someone like Ariel or Brett or someone like that that you would defer your knowledge to and get the questions from them or whatever. So that's what I think it should be. But yeah, I agree. I think he was visibly annoyed by them. I think they started off on the wrong foot with the takedown thing. I think he's been that he has to have been hearing that over and over again because I've heard him talk about it in a few different interviews where talk about how annoying that is, and he's like trying to get it through to people. He's like, "What do you think? I can just go in there and walk through all of his punches and take him down?" He's like, "It's not that easy." So yeah, they got off to a bad start with him, and they didn't, and they just kept it going downhill. They already got him annoyed, and they were like, "You're coming off of 2 losses. This is going to be it for you if you lose." Like you're just asking for him. Like I was surprised he didn't do the Tyson thing where he walked out.
And I guess my last sort of point on this is if I'm Donald Cerrone, I would have been ticked off. I might have not even done the interview just based off of how you guys talked about the fight or lack thereof earlier in the week when you had guys had a segment to talk about Conor McGregor and Donald Cerrone, but instead it was Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather 2. That's a conversation for a completely different day. I refuse to talk about that any further than just that right now. But hey, if I was Cerrone, I'd be like, oh no, you guys can only mention my name twice in an entire segment. No, I'm not doing this. So I get why he's ticked. But to get back to Conor McGregor's side of this, I guess let's talk about that a little bit, the mental side of things. That we can talk about all the storylines and how he's going to react and what Conor's going to show up. But as far as inside the cage, that's one of those things where I feel like that could translate to his cardio because one of the talking points that I feel like is going completely glossed over is the fact that yes, he's at 170 and yes, he's had questionable cardio, but there's also a little bit of you have to settle into the weight group. He's not fighting Nate Diaz to scrap a card on 11 days notice. This isn't that. He's fought at 170 multiple times. He's actually we talk about guys taking time off in between fights and dealing with injuries and things like that. He actually has some money to where he can do that and be fine. So I feel like the fact that he settled into the weight group, he's going to have that confidence from, the mental side to know that I'm actually settled into it now. This ain't a rush job. And I've actually had time to develop. And, Nate Diaz and those guys have talked about how when you're taking fights constantly, you can't really develop. Well, if you're going to read and take anything away from the promo videos Conor McGregor has put out via his various outlets, you can at least see the flip of that where he takes time off. You see a little bit of development. So, what do you make or what do you take away from the mental side of this? Do you think that it will manifest itself into any sort of concrete aspect of this fight as far as he's concerned?
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, is true from what we hear from all fighters, where they say, once you have a fight scheduled, it's just getting prepared for that fight, but you really make your gains in the off season when you don't have a fight scheduled and you're just working on getting better at things. And Connor's had a long time of doing that and being off this last year. And before that, he was off for a while and then preparing for a boxing match. And you got to think that improved the fluidity of his striking and some of that stuff. And we never really got to see that because in the Khabib fight, one, he wasn't in the right frame of mind. So he says, he was drinking the whole fight week, all that kind of stuff. So that obviously is not conducive to a good performance. But also, he had to go against someone like Khabib, who you have to constantly be worried about takedown, so you can't really open up your striking. So maybe that's something we'll see in this fight, which would be a scary thought because he already had some really really incredible striking, particularly boxing. So to see that get better would be really cool. But yeah, I think we're going to see some legitimate improvements because of what you're saying. He's had time to just go through and like work on some. That's what we all hope he's been doing, right? We all hope he's been working on the things that he wasn't good at or working at the things he wants to get better. Hopefully, not just continuing on the things that he's already good at. But I mean, we'll see in the fight. But if we're just making like predictions of what we're going to see, I think we're going to see a better version of Conor. I think it'll be a different version than we've seen in the past. It's not this young, arrogant guy that's going to go in there cocky. I think it's going to be similar to what we've seen in DS2, where it's all calculated, it's precise. He's not worried about getting him out of there right away, but if he does, he does. And then being prepared to actually go 5 hard rounds if he has to. So that's what I'm thinking.
Unless there's anything you feel like you have to add as far as he's concerned, I feel like there's a lot that has been said as far as this is, concerned, as far as this fight week is concerned. And we aren't even really to the meat and bones yet as far as the presser and things like that. So last time I know that we did this for the second part of towards the end of the second part of the Donald Cerrone preview. I know that we did our picks. So I don't know about you, but I'm ready to lock it in, make it official, and get this fight week started.
Yep, I'm ready to do. You want me to go ahead and make my pick?
Yep, take it away.
Yeah, okay. So last time when we did the Cerrone part, my pick was second round TKO for Conor McGregor. I've thought about it a lot and seen the interviews with Conor. I mean, maybe I'm just falling into the hype. You know, I've been a victim of that before, and I will be again. So maybe that's what's going on. Maybe he's tricking me. But I think we're gonna see a good Conor. I think he's gonna be fierce. He's gonna look for a win. I think he's gonna look for a clean win. So I was just thinking about contemplating moving it down to a first round knockout, but I think it's a second round TKO for Conor McGregor. I think he hurts him bad in the first. I think Cowboy makes it out of the round and then comes back and gets finished midway through the second round. I think it's maybe what happened in the Alvarez fight, but not the particular shot. I think he catches with something, Cowboy drops, ground and pound, finishes him in the second. Not the type of ground and pound where they're actually on the ground wrestling, just a couple like finishing shots, you know.
Yeah, it's like you got all right, so you got Conor McGregor, and for me I was thinking because last time anyone that listened to part two, you guys know I picked Donald Cerrone via TKO. And it's interesting for me because it's like, especially since we have more time to just think about this, and especially since we just did Conor McGregor's part, I was really just thinking more and more. And I think that both things can be true. I believe that on one hand, we can see the best Conor McGregor that we've ever seen. I do believe that we can see him sort of resharpen and retool all of his skills and we can see a new foil. But I also believe, and this leads me into my actual pick, I also believe that all of that could be true and it will not be enough for Donald Cerrone. I truly believe that Donald Cerrone, I don't think that he has, this is not a skill set pick. This is not me saying that I think it will be a complete outclass situation because I do think we'll see the best version of Conor McGregor, but when it comes to the X factors and the approach and things like that, and just transitions and what happens in between the techniques, what happens in those little blind spots, what happens when these guys try to get up from grappling situations, what happens when things have to get initiated or when they're done being initiated and it's time to separate. When those situations come up and it truly is a toss of the coin, I've got Donald Cerrone, and I think that if he does make it to the middle to later rounds, again, Conor McGregor can fix all of his cardio issues, but I still think that once Cerrone truly gets it going, he'll be able to initiate more and more and won't be as afraid of Conor McGregor's left because he'll be more comfortable. His offense will open up, and I do believe we'll see a TKO from Donald Cerrone over Conor McGregor in the third round. So, all right, you've got Conor McGregor. I've got Donald Cerrone. Is that official? That it? Ready to lock it in?
Yeah, I'm ready to lock in. Again, no disrespect to Cowboy. I mean, what you're saying is 100% true. You know, this is one of those fights that it could kind of go either way, and we can kind of all visualize in our head how this guy's going to win. Like if it goes to this, he'll win. If it goes later, he'll win. So yeah, it's a close one. Like you said, we might see a new Conor McGregor, we might see an old one, and we might see a more improved one. That it still is enough to beat a motivated Cowboy who is ready to finally have that like crowning moment of his career. So yeah, we don't know what could happen. I mean, the one of them could pull out of the fight tomorrow, and then Max Holloway step up, and we have a whole different discussion. You never know with the UFC and crazy fight weeks like this, so that's what makes it so fun.
Yeah, I just think it just feels like for one of those things that made me initially start to pick it was just like, man, Cerrone, he's coming in, he's had a rough go as of late. And again, when I talk about Cerrone making the fact that he's a father a point. The only reason why I make it a point is because he's clearly making it a point. And I feel like just that was one of the things that made me realize we've seen other fighters go through this. They hit that point where, and I said Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, we saw him go through it last year. These guys, they do not want to stay stuck in the middle forever. These guys actually do want to be remembered, no matter how much they try to just feed you the "oh, I'm highly motivated" lines. Like they just want to read that off. No, I think Cerrone's at that point, and I'm sorry, I just believe as far as this fight is concerned, it just has to start with Conor McGregor. But again, we'll see. This weekend it's going down Saturday, January 18th, 2020. So, Austin, before we get out of here, anything else you feel like we got to go over? Anything you feel like we missed when it comes to this fight?
Yeah, I have one last question. It's a prediction, similar to who wins. My question for you is: if Conor McGregor wins, who's the next man he'll fight? And if Cowboy wins, who's the next man he'll fight? Just a off the top of the head prediction.
Off the top of the head, if Connor wins, I think there will be a lot of talk getting generated about Khabib, but I think ultimately, it's going to be Jorge Masvidal. That seems to make the most sense to me. Just as far as him staying up there at 170, what fight actually makes sense? Jorge Masvidal, he's the hottest name up there right now. He can dodge the sort of wrestling alley that would be trying to go for the actual 170, but at the same time, it is a marquee matchup because Jorge Masvidal is hot right now. And for Donald Cerrone, I don't want to say the cop out and say, oh, well, he could pick anyone, but it does feel like he can pick any name out of the hat. But for Cerrone, if he's able to do it, man, I feel like a headlining spot would be nice. We haven't seen that in a while. I don't know who do you go with? Colby Covington doesn't sound too bad. I don't really know. For some reason, I want to say Colby Covington just because it feels like if we're gonna get any last little bit of relevance out of him before he goes back into being just another guy in the welterweight division, why not do that? But that could also be a stylistic headache and a stifle match. So I don't know if you want to do that to Cerrone. What do you think?
So, what I think as far as Conor goes, I think he fights Jorge Masvidal after this. Uh, the Cerrone one's a little different. This one's kind of a stretch. So it's kind of a wild prediction, but I think Cerrone fights the winner of Tony Ferguson Khabib. I know Justin Gaethje's out there and he would have the rightful spot because he beat Cerrone, but I think beating Conor puts a lot of cloud on Cowboy's name. I don't think he'll continue in the welterweight division trying to fight Kamaru and all them. I think he'll go back down to lightweight, and I think they'll give him the winner of Ferguson Khabib.
I'm gonna be honest. No answer in this case feels like a bad one, just because we have no clarity as to what's going on at welterweight, given the fact that there's two belts there, and the fact that lightweight is just. I mean, it feels like we've been talking about the lightweight logjam forever, and again, Nate Diaz is one tweet away from jacking all of these plans up anyway. So it's just like we are in interesting times. And then you've got names like Anthony Pettis floating out there. So, I don't know why. In hindsight, I don't know why I just said Colby Covington for Cerrone. If I'm Cerrone, there's no way in the world I would take that one. But it truly just feels like no answer is a bad one, just given how chaotic those two divisions have been over the past 2-3 years now. Welterweight, not so much, but definitely over the past year at least. So, anything else before we get out of here?
No, that's all I wanted. I agree with what you're saying. There's no wrong. That's why it was just a random question. There's no wrong answers. It could be someone we're not even contemplating right now. You know, that's how wild MMA is. So we'll find out. That's the cool, fun part about it is a lot of questions and then they finally get answered. So yeah, no, I'm all good.
Oh, Leon Edwards out here getting forgotten and all. RDA is like, I gotta fight everyone in both divisions to get some clout. But we will definitely see. But Austin, before we get out of here, let the people know where they can find you, social media, websites, anything like that at all.
Yeah, on Twitter at MMAPanic, and the website is MMAPanic.com.
All right, you heard it there. You can find Austin on Twitter at MMAPanic, the website MMAPanic.com. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at Nixon_speaks. and I'll see you guys later on in the week.